Hello, and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotello, Esquire, and Evan Ginzburg. And tonight we have a very special guest, part of the Witness Exchange program that we have going on with podcasts. It's my good friend, or at least I can call him my good friend now, all the way from Tampa Bay, Benny Scala from the Dan and Benny Show. Welcome to this evening's Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast podcast. And
it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And to quote the great Pedro Morales, I'm ready for any kind of action.
Any kind of action. So Evan's is going to be on for a short while with us tonight, because we're going to do a very special, I think, podcast, something a little different. Benny and I want to talk baseball, and I know it's not Evan's top of mind subject. So we're going to talk a little bit about the AEW pay-per-view, maybe any other big wrestling issues, the topics that are off the top of your head, and then we'll move on to a mostly baseball-based discussion tonight. So what did you get a chance to watch the pay-per-view, Evan?
AEW?
Yes.
Just the prelims.
So what did you have to say about those matches?
The 6-man with with Penta, it was very good. I don't understand the religious fervor over Hook, who's had all of like a dozen matches.
That's Taz Jr., isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that kid could do no wrong. He's on the fanboy good list, and they had a women's match that was nothing special. And when an hour into it, I just said, I'm not paying $50 for this pay-per-view, and I moved on to other things. I happen to like AEW, but I'm not one to like sit and watch hours and hours of wrestling by myself, and I'm certainly not a tape guy. And I'd like to see more house shows. Basically, they're just doing TV tapings. I enjoy going to a house show with friends and that whole experience. I did not go to WWE's Madison Square Garden card last night, and gratefully so, because Reigns and Rollins went all of 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Can you imagine Bruno or Backlund coming out and wrestling 5 minutes? It never would have happened,
No.
And the ring entrances are taking longer than the actual match themselves.
Yeah, I think it's almost like Pavlov's dogs at this point. They play the music, the fans pop. They do, the strut for 7 minutes to the ring. Then the fans like the shtick. And Lesnar squashed Austin Theory. And I mean,
so that was what they wanted. That was supposed to be Lashley against Lesnar, wasn't it? The main event was supposed
Lashley's legit hurt. So
they give you Theory instead. That's their equivalent. They're like, that's like going in and ordering a filet mignon, and you wind up getting
hamburger helper.
Yeah, hamburger helper. Exactly. They go, look, it's got filet in there somewhere. We filleted the hamburgers. There's no bones in the hamburgers, so you're getting your filet.
I mean, I've been watching wrestling literally 50 years. I started watching in 72, and I started attending in 74. I've never seen anything like this, where they just said, Brock Lesnar's defending the belt, and you take
come
what
and
we
see
give
him.
You. Yeah. You take what we give you and like it. And ringside was as high as $225, which
Yikes.
I just think is absurd for a mediocre house show. And adding insult to injury, I just kept seeing one fan after another going how much they liked it. It's like this. The bar is set so low. After the match, Roman Reigns and the Usos attacked Lesnar, and I guess they enjoyed that. But I want to see a great match. If I'm going to a 3-hour wrestling card and commuting each way, I want to see great wrestling, and they said the Usos and New Day were good, but we've seen that 5,000 times. So, I mean,
any clue as to what the gate was on it or how big the crowd was?
They said it was nearly full, so it's a big gate at those prices. Tickets are basically 20 to 225.
But I wonder if they put a card on at MSG, like 3 consecutive months, what the attendance would be in month 3. Guarantee it would be near full.
They couldn't draw 3 months in a row.
Right, exactly.
They didn't draw during their Christmas show. They had a horrible crowd a couple months back. The other thing is, I think AEW and ROH and New Japan, considering they sold it out in no time, they should put it together another super card like that. At least it would feel special and different. And but I am not their target audience anymore. It's almost like they're money marks and proud of it. The same day yesterday, we had a convention here. Undertaker's selling autographs for $200 a pop. Photo ops $200 a pop, and it's like the fans are cool with it. It's like money's no object. I don't know if they just put it on their credit cards and run it up for all this stuff, or it's a richer crowd. It's not a blue collar crowd anymore. I couldn't honestly say, but I don't know. I mean, $200 an autograph and $225 for a house show. Seems like fans have money nowadays.
I work too hard for mine. I don't know about them.
I mean,
yeah, wait until they work in NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, to all of that to make an even greater profit grab at everything.
I mean, WrestleMania, they got $5,000 packages and etc. so on, and I see fanboys with mountains of memorabilia and wrestlers' outfits, and just seems like money's no object unless it's an addiction like anything else, and they're running up huge credit card bills for it. I don't know, but I know people that went to the convention and spent a fortune, went to the Garden Card, and then flew out to AEW. It's like lifestyles of the rich and famous. It's like
I guess if you save up your whole vacation budget and that's everything you do all year, and that's the highest point that you get to all year, then I guess that's money well spent. At least ask the people who did it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because now that the cards are 3 or 4 times a year in these major arenas instead of monthly, that's pretty much what it is. This is Junior's graduation present. This is the twins' Christmas present, and there's a sea of little kiddies there, and with mommy and daddy, and they have all the gimmicks and the junk food, and throw in the parking, and they spend $500 or whatever for the evening, and it's.
Now, Benny, you said your son watches AEW. How old is your son?
My son's 36. I got a video tonight of him watching with my grandson, who's 3. But he just kind of casually watches. He's not really a fan.
Well, let me segue into the baseball, and I'll let you guys go at it. At Yankee Stadium, I live in New York, obviously, as you could tell by my accent.
No.
At Yankee Stadium, they were selling behind home plate for $2,500. $2,500 a ticket for regular season. I'm not talking the World Series. I'm talking for any home game, $2,500. So every time the camera would pan, behind home plate, there was nobody there. There was nobody there, and it was an embarrassment. So the New York Yankees, greed mongers that they are, graciously cut the price in half to $1,250 behind home plate.
Very generous.
So it's a money machine from the minute you pull the car into the parking lot for $40 or whatever, give or take a few. And so I kind of got disgusted with baseball over the years as well. I come from an era where, you know, the 69 and 73 Mets, these were blue collar guys. Seaver got $100,000 and people were, it was like front page news. Like, oh my God, this guy's making $100,000 and people were jealous, you know, because it was a fortune of money back then. These guys had winter jobs in the off season. They lived in the neighborhood. They were blue collar guys. And now you got 220 hitters making millions of dollars, and you know, and the owners are even worse. I mean, even worse. You know, they have $1 billion, you know, TV deals. And it is what it is. But you guys are the experts. I lost touch with it a long time ago, and to me, a guy like Roberto Clemente, was a hero. A hero. This guy died helping people. This guy wasn't worried about selling autographs to kids or whatnot. I mean, it's a different world today, and greed is not good. And the corporate apologists who do what the market will bear. You know what? I'm not paying hundreds of bucks to see a home game, you know, with the Mets either.
No, and in that respect, wrestling and baseball aren't that far apart. They're very similar in the way they approach their fans and see them as this constant ATM that they can just withdraw money from, no matter what the product is like.
The one thing that's good with baseball is, you know, you could sit in the outfield for $8 or $10 still, and, you know, if you don't have it, you could still at least attend. The wrestling's getting a little out of hand, where it's even AEW, who you know, $300 for ringside for a TV taping. I just think it's absurd. I just don't get it. But anyway, I'll let you guys talk baseball.
Well, it's great to have you on this week, even for a short time. I'll let you get back. I hope everything's going great with your wife. I know she was a little under the weather, so maybe you can take care of her, and we'll carry on the show without you, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, Benny, is your partner like in witness protection? We've never actually seen this guy.
He does exist, I promise.
Oh, okay, man.
We'll get him on the show one of these days.
All right. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week, Evan.
All right. That's my vent.
So now it's just us. Now we can talk all the baseball we can handle. So, what would you like to start talking?
Well, you know, it's really funny because Evan was mentioning the 1969 Mets, and I wrote down literally. I have 12 stories here, or 11 stories spanning over 50 years.
One of my stories. I'll just go, and you can just go on. I'll take the rest of the night off. I'll let you.
When Evan was talking about the prices of the tickets, I grew up in Long Island, not too far from where Evan lived, and there was the Huntington Mall had a Macy's, and in the back of Macy's there was kind of like a almost like mail slots, and they had tickets to every Mets game. And you could buy, I think the top price was $7 for a box seat. But I actually went in 1970 to a doubleheader at Yankee Stadium with my friend Paul Weinstock, and hopefully he's listening. Hey, Paul, and he's going to be you'll hear his name in several of these stories. We paid 75 cents to sit in the bleachers at Yankee Stadium in 1970 to watch a doubleheader.
Wow.
And I mean, it's come so far the other way that, I mean, you have to think about buying a ticket now. You never thought about it back then.
And when I take my kids to go see the Giants now, we only go to 1 or 2 games for a whole season. You know, my uncle used to have seasons tickets back at Candlestick Park in the 60s and 70s and 80s, all the way up till when they moved to Pac Bell / AT&T / Oracle, whatever you want to call it now. But it when we used to go to Candlestick Park, a lot of times, especially in the late 70s, the Giants weren't very good. So my dad would buy one ticket, and my uncle would have another one. And then if my dad bought a ticket, he'd usually get 2 other tickets thrown in for free for my brother and myself. So it would be basically 3 for 1 tickets, you know, a Candlestick, and now it's obviously the other way around. You pay what you would have paid for maybe 100 tickets. You get one ticket to get into a ball game now.
I have to tell you about my very first game, and thanks to Baseball Almanac, because I have a lot of memories, and I knew I went to my first game in 1964, and I knew, ironically, against the San Francisco Giants. And I knew it was 14 innings. So I went onto Baseball Almanac, and I found that it was August 4th, 1964, the Mets versus the Giants. The Giants won in 14 innings.
Wow.
And yes, and there were actually 5 Hall of Famers that played for the Giants that day. So Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Orlando Cepeda, Gaylord Perry, and one which you might not have guessed, Duke Snider, who played for the Giants in 1960. He was a pinch hitter. For the Mets, the only Hall of Famer was Casey Stengel. And then the winning pitcher was one of my favorite ball players, Jim Duffalo. One of my first Topps baseball cards was a 1963 Jim Duffalo, which I thought his name was actually Jim Buffalo, and I thought they just messed it up at Topps. But yeah, from Helvetia, Pennsylvania, actually a pretty decent pitcher. But that was my very first game. Now, keep in mind, in 1964, there was no color TV. So, I mean, every game I had ever watched was in black and white. And when you go down up that runway and you take a look at that field, having never seen a game in color, there's no words to describe how beautiful it was. For a 9-year-old kid, I was hooked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I grew up going to so many games at Candlestick Park, probably more like 15 to 20 games a year, thanks to my uncle's tickets and just it being such a affordable thing to go see. And my dad was a big baseball fan. He grew up a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and when they moved out of Brooklyn, it broke his heart. So he was furious at baseball. And then he moved to San Francisco, and Brooklyn had, moved to Los Angeles, and San Francisco and LA have that built-in rivalry. Although that was really the real start of that rivalry was when Brooklyn got the Dodgers and the Giants moved to San Francisco. And he moved to San Francisco just a few years after the Giants were here. So he adopted the Giants immediately, and he passed the love of the Giants on to me. And I got to admit, I'm to be really totally honest with you, I'm not the biggest baseball fan in the world, but I'm a huge, huge Giants fan. I mean, I my knowledge of baseball isn't all encompassing, but my love of the Giants goes to the very fabric of my being. It is.
See, we're polar opposites. I mean, I love the Yankees now as a kid, though. So my dad was a service manager for a Chevy dealership in Long Island, New York, and one of his customers was the PR director for the Mets. So we got to sit in the press box, and anytime we wanted. And my dad was not a baseball fan, but thank God he was a great dad. So, I mean, there was, okay, and I excuse me, looked up the dates for this. August 31st and September 1st, 1965. The Mets and the Astros, back-to-back twilight doubleheaders, which is something you would never see ever again. So I got to watch 4 games in 2 days, and we sat through all 4 games. I mean,
wow,
for nothing. I mean, and in the press box, you could hear the announcers. I mean, I guess it was Ralph Kiner, Lindsey Nelson, and Bob Murphy for the Mets. But what a for a 9-year-old kid, 10-year-old kid, what a treat.
Yeah, no, and so baseball really burrowed its claws into you, back in, and it is a big part of my childhood, and one of the things that definitely I bonded over with my dad, who died in October of last year at almost age 89, and that we didn't have a ton of things in common. In fact, he despised wrestling, so we would never talk about that. He never saw me perform as a manager. Never wanted to go to a wrestling match. He liked it as a kid, and then he said he grew out of it, like comics and all that other stuff. And guess what? I still love wrestling, and I still love my comics, and the only thing that we really could bond over was politics and sports like baseball, football, and basketball. But baseball, I think, had the biggest hold on us. Maybe because here in San Francisco, we had to wait till 2010 to get our first World Series win. And that to me meant so much, to see a team that had gone 50 years without winning a championship to then win their very first title. It was really something that touched the city of San Francisco in a way deeper than I think any of the other championships that I've watched, including the 5 titles for the 49ers and the 4 titles, but really recently 3 titles won by the Golden State Warriors. The first title that the Warriors won wasn't a big deal. I have to explain to a lot of people that in 1974 and 1975, when the Warriors won the NBA championship, basketball was nearly out of business. And they actually had to, in seasons before, when the circus would come to town, the Warriors would have to move to another location to do their basketball games, like to the Civic Auditorium, because the circus was in town and took up the Cow Palace.
Who was even on that Warriors team? I'm thinking, was Rick Barry on that team?
Yeah, that was Rick Barry. That was Clifford Ray. That was Phil Smith. That was Jeff Mullins. That was
Nate Thurman. Was he already retired?
No, they had just gotten rid of Nate Thurman. Al Attles was the coach.
Yes.
But Nate Thurman had just been traded for Clifford Ray. Clifford Ray was their big man.
Okay.
Who got them the title. But it was really Rick Barry that,
I was heartbroken because Barry played for the Nets. And he played right at the Island Garden in Hempstead when they were in the ABA. And actually, that was where I saw my first wrestling show in 1968. My dad was neither a baseball fan nor a wrestling fan, but like I said, he was a great dad. And I had seen an interview with Bruno on TV, but for whatever reason, wrestling was on in the living room, which it never was. And Bruno started speaking in Italian, so my mom was in the kitchen, because my mom was always in the kitchen making something great to eat. And I said, "Mom, he's talking in Italian. Can you translate for me?" And she came in and she translated what Bruno said, and she goes, he's a good man. And that's what got me started watching. And then they were going to Island Gardens in Hempstead was probably about 20 minutes from where we grew up and where we lived. And my dad took me to the card. It was Bruno versus Toru Tanaka was the main event. And I mean, 54 years later, and I love it more than I ever do. Now, I'm like Evan, though. I really don't watch the current product. I'm in a time warp, but I'll go on YouTube. I'll watch Johnny Rods and SD Jones. I'll watch them 100 times, and I'll enjoy it.
Sure. Well, we'll get to that. Go into that a little bit later, but I want to focus on baseball because we have this unique opportunity.
Oh, absolutely.
To really get a chance to talk about it, because right now we would normally be talking about what's going on in spring training, but there's nothing to talk about because of the lockout. What are your thoughts about this lockout?
And I did a little, because quite honestly, I haven't been following it that close. Because, excuse me, if they don't play, now, do I want them to play? Absolutely. My son, Dan, my middle son, lives in Minneapolis, maybe 10 minutes from Target Field, and I plan on going out this summer and, catching a couple of games. And I would definitely miss that. But, living in Florida, I have the Dunedin Blue Jays about 20 minutes from my house. I have the Clearwater Threshers. I love minor league baseball. Minor league baseball is a great, inexpensive, family-oriented form of entertainment. Bless you. And so I'm good. Even if they don't play, I'm good. But I guess I'm kind of, now I understand, the players, in my mind, the players are still trying to stick it to the owners for all the years that they were oppressed. And I was just doing a little bit of research. Mickey Mantle, I think, won the Triple Crown in 1956, I believe. And I think he made 50 grand that year, which is probably one of the top salaries in the league. And so, back in the day, they'd mail you a contract. They're always one-year contracts. They were never multi-year. So you got a contract for 57 for 50 grand. So, like, leading the league, I think, with a 353 average, 52 homers, and 130 RBIs. And I'm quoting this off the top of my head, but I think I'm right on all of those. And they gave him no raise. And, I mean, what choice did he have? Either he took what they offered them, or he sat at home. He didn't, free agency was 20 years away. And so, but I think it's just gotten a little bit ridiculous. I mean, all these guys are multimillionaires. I mean, and we, the fans, are the ones who lose out on it.
Oh, absolutely. Right now, I mean, it's one of the it's the worst cliffhanger that you could ever go through as a Giants fan. We won 107 games last year. We had the pennant race between the Dodgers, who won 106 games, and the Giants winning 107. And they were breathing down our neck. We went to a Game 5 against them at home, and we get called out on the final strike of the game. And it was a called, non-check swing out, on the Giants. And what a difficult way to end that season. And the main thing you want, when you lose something so close, is you want the season to start again the next day.
Right.
You don't want to have to wait for the time between when baseball ends and baseball starts is the longest off season in sports. And so that hangover time where the fact that it's going to be stretched out even longer, and that there may be no games in April. They're talking about maybe they would start the season up in May, and who knows. In fact, in 1995, my brother and I drove across the United States, and my only opportunity to see a game live at Wrigley Field was when I drove through Chicago. And my brother and I, there would have been a Mets game. So we would have seen the Mets against the Cubs. And there's a picture that my brother and I have of the two of us in the center of center field at the Cubs logo with our heads bent down and our hats off because there was no game because of the lockout, the strike. So my only chance to see a game at Wrigley Field live, and it was ruined by the baseball strike. So here we are, now in 2022, and I can only imagine how many people's dreams and hopes have been dashed because of this lockout. And it doesn't seem there's a really great reason to have this happen. And as we were talking earlier about Vince McMahon and the way he runs the WWE, no free agency, no union, nothing like that, his iron grip on it, versus the way that the owners have tried to have that same kind of iron grip, but have failed in this situation, and now there's no baseball. I wonder what Vince McMahon would do if, for whatever reason, all the wrestlers decided they wouldn't perform anymore.
But, it's really funny because I was thinking about that, too. WWE superstars are independent contractors. I'm pretty sure they're
independent contractors when Vince wanted them to be, but when he wanted them to perform during the COVID epidemic, he called them essential employees, so that they had to wrestle during the COVID crisis. You know how that all works.
Right. But, I mean, as far as I know, they're not getting benefits. They're not getting a pension. And even as far as, of course, even though they're independent contractors, they can't work for anybody else. And I believe their, any revenue that's derived from the use of their name, it has to be shared with Vince, correct?
Correct. It's the most unfair contract in the United States, and with recent laws in California, I'm not even sure he's capable of doing that. But somehow Vince, because he had, especially during the Trump years, he had, Trump under his thumb, and his wife, serving on one of his cabinets as the Secretary of Small Business Administration. The wrestlers were really exempt from anything like that. But, right. I wonder if that's going to be something that Vince is going to be able to do forever.
Yeah, I don't know how he gets away with it, though. I mean, now on the flip side, an MLB ball player is an employee, does qualify for a very nice pension, and any endorsement revenue they get is theirs. So, I mean, to me, they got it. They have it made. I don't quite understand. I mean, and like you said, I don't see this monumental issue that's dividing them. I mean, there's it's like pizza. There's plenty for everybody. And you're going to eat your fill, and you're going to have there's still going to be some left over. What these guys are all millionaires, so why can't you just play? But that's a fan's point of view. I'm not a player.
Sure, no, and it's more the owners that as far as I see, that are the ones that are the intransigent ones, and saying, first of all, they're the ones that put off negotiating for so many months. I mean, it is reprehensible that, baseball ended in October of last year, and they didn't even start talking until, February. That they would go so many months and do that kind of boneheaded brinksmanship to push it to that level, so that you would only have, a couple of weeks to negotiate these things. And then they only met for like an hour a day or something like that, or they'd have 15-minute meetings and waste all this time going into the season without, taking it seriously. And I think the message sent to the fans is that they didn't care enough, the owners didn't care enough about the fans missing any games. They look at it as like, oh, well, nobody goes to April games. Nobody goes to, we don't make enough money in the preseason. But to places like Scottsdale, Arizona, and some places in Florida where they have a lot of spring training towns.
Tampa for the Yankees.
Yeah, there you go. That's a huge loss. And it's something that those towns and the people that support that are supported by spring training baseball. I mean, Major League Baseball looks at things that don't earn them things in the hundreds of millions of dollars and says, that's just not worth our time. That's not worth our effort. But as we were just pointing out, it's the lower echelon of baseball when you're talking about it from the minor leagues and kids playing it in the playgrounds and things like that garners the love of baseball to the level where it's worth millions of dollars. If you don't have that love of baseball as a kid, you're not going to want to spend that money on it as an adult, I don't think.
No, you're absolutely correct.
And so I think they're losing that. They're really jeopardizing losing that link between what made kids and young adults love baseball and when they have disposable income as adults, want to take their kids and spend the money to make sure that their kids can feel the same love of the game that they had as children. And I'm finding that to be a real challenge with my children who are 10, and I'm sure your son will have that problem with his son when he's ready to go to baseball game.
Well, and I'm just having flashbacks here. Back in, I guess, the mid to late 80s was when the baseball card craze started really sweeping the nation. And, so when you're a kid now in the late 80s, you're going to open a pack of cards and you're going to equate the value of the cards to what they're actually worth. Well, this is a Will Clark rookie card and it's worth so much money. Back in the day, if I opened a pack of cards in 1963 and I saw Willie Mays, I was thrilled. You know, I had no idea how much it was worth. All I know is I have a card with Willie Mays on it, and I think, you know, that's the love of baseball I had. And I don't know that, it's kind of like wrestling, you know, back in Memphis in the '80s, where, you know, people were going to the Mid-South Coliseum every Monday night to watch wrestling. I mean, 52 weeks a year. That love of wrestling will never exist again. And I'm starting to wonder if, like, that love of baseball at that level when we were kids, well, you know, are the youth of today, are they going to know that?
Yeah, mine won't. I mean, I can tell you already, they won't. As great as my love of the Giants have been, and that they've grown up at least with seeing two World Series championships in their lifetime. They didn't see the 2010 because they weren't born yet, but they've been around for two of the championships and last year's 107 win team. But they aren't clamoring. I mean, they don't mind going to a game, and they find it fun because I pack all sorts of food that they love, and you know, they pig out once we get to the stadium. But do they sit there and do they keep score of the game? Do they watch, you know, every inning of it? No, they don't, and I don't think they will. I don't think they're going to love baseball in that same fashion. And I think that if they take this season off, if they don't play baseball at all this year, they're going to lose so many fans that I don't know if it's ever going to come back. And that would be a real tragedy, because it's such a big fabric of what makes America America. And behind you there, you have Murderers Row. You know, each one of those names that's that you have behind you isn't just big for baseball. They're big for American history. I mean, Lou Gehrig, you know, he's his name means a lot to everyone across the world because of course, the Lou Gehrig's disease and so forth. But there's more to him than that. Stan Musial and Babe Ruth, obviously, you know, and Lazzeri and you know, all these other legends that were etched into stone are things that for generations meant more than just baseball. They meant something about sporting excellence.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things with free agency is, you know, back in the day, you're a Yankee fan, you know, Mickey Mantle comes up in 1951, retires in 1969. So for, you know, 18 seasons, you watch Mickey Mantle. You know, and now, like, I'm a huge Albert Pujols fan, so I didn't really care where he played. But I mean, I have to think that after he finished with the Cardinals, they had to be absolutely heartbroken when he left for the money and played for the Angels.
Right, and I think, isn't he on the Dodgers now?
If they pick him up again, but,
yeah.
You know, getting back to your point though, like those guys, like, you know, like a Lou Gehrig, a Babe Ruth, those guys, Stan the Man, they were larger than life, you know, to the American public. I mean, they were icons. They you know, people looked up to them, right or wrong. And nowadays, I mean, you don't have that same feel for a professional athlete. They're rich guys that play baseball.
Well, and also I think the roles have changed so much in baseball, because obviously my favorite team is the 2012 San Francisco Giants. And I personally think that's the best season in baseball that a team could have, is the one that the 2012 Giants had. Now, obviously, you would counter back with your Yankees from what, 1920?
I would say either 27, or I'd even maybe counter 1998.
The 1998 Yankees that won, what,
114 games.
114?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's an amazing team. And that had the Clemens was on there, right?
Yeah, you had Bernie, you had Jorge Posada, you had Jeter, you had Mo. Just a great team.
Yes. Well, as I counter back with the Giants in 2012, I would argue and say that Buster Posey had the best season a baseball player could have. And I would say that because he not only had the batting title, but he also won Most Improved Player. He also won Most Inspirational Player, and for the Willie Mack Award for the San Francisco Giants. Plus, of course, he got a World Series, and he came back from the broken leg that he had the year before in 2011 that changed the rules of baseball, changed the slide rule at home plate, which, I think is one of the few good rule changes that baseball's had of recent.
I'm going to say something, and maybe as a Yankee fan, I might be burned at the stake, but I would argue that the 1927 Yankees had better players than the 2012 Giants, but I would also say that the 2012 Giants were a better team.
I thought they were. I mean,
as far as like the players functioning together as a cohesive unit, they were probably, they could argue, you could say they were the best team ever.
Things fell into place in such a way, especially with 2012, that I don't think any other baseball team is ever going to have happen. Not only did they have amazing pitchers in guys like Madison Bumgarner was just getting started on that team, and you had Tim Lincecum, and you had Matt Cain. Yeah, exactly. But you had guys like Vogelsong, who hadn't done anything and played amazingly for the Giants. But maybe the biggest deal was that Barry Zito, who'd been left off the roster in 2010, and Pablo Sandoval, who had been left off the roster in 2010, redeemed themselves by having phenomenal postseasons. And you had the miracle of Scudero in the rain game that, there's that one picture of him with the outstretched arms while the rain was falling down, and should have probably been a rain delay, but they let the game go on so they could finish it up. And that's also the postseason where Pablo Sandoval hit 3 home runs in a single game that tied your boy Reggie Jackson.
You also had Melky Cabrera, of all people, hit 346 that year, which is
although he wound
unbelievable.
up then getting pulled off the roster because of the drug allegations.
And then, like you said, Pablo Sandoval, when you match him up, the 27 Yankees third baseman was Joe Dugan, and Sandoval had a better year. They win that one. It was
just everything kind of clicked into place, but that was also the year where you had the Giants go 0-2 in their first series and still win. Then they went down 2-1 in the next series and won, and then they were down. Then they swept in the World Series. But they were someone called them cockroaches because they said the Giants refused to die, and it was when they were down 0-2 or down 2-1. And Cain and Lincecum had terrible games that Zito and Vogelsong saved the Giants and allowed them to, go back into the lead up 3-2 in the series and then win the final game against, I think it was St. Louis at that point, or maybe it was the Nationals. It's sad to think that now 10 years ago has happened since the 2012 Giants played baseball, and it makes me a little sad to think that wow, that was a decade already. But it was.
It's not always about who has the best players. I mean, look at the '69 Mets against the '69 Orioles. They had the Orioles had Frank and Brooks Robinson. They had Mark Belanger at shortstop. One of the best shortstops ever. They had Boog Powell. They had Paul Blair in center field, who's to me one of the best center fielders ever. And the Yankees, the Mets just had a ragtag bunch of players, but everybody did what they had to when it had to be done, and they won.
And that's something that I think is more baseball than any other sport. I really think that you have more of these rags to riches type That's why we haven't had a repeat baseball championship, I think, since the Yankees in 99, 2000.
Right.
You know, we've gone 20 years without any baseball team able to repeat as champions. And that might be one of the things that does get, but I don't think the 2000 team was as good as the 99 Yankees team. In fact, that was the interesting part about Buddy Sotello, my wrestling character, is that at the time, I was playing my character was a lawyer from New York, an Italian lawyer from New York. And so when I went to New York City to give myself kind of a New York like flavor tour, and I found a Yankees tie on sale at one of the stores. So I bought the Yankees tie, and it generated so much heat. My Yankees tie there was so much heat here in the Bay Area because all the A's fans, and we were doing a lot of our stuff in the East Bay, were really anti-Yankee, and so because the Yankees were dominating so much at that point, so it was great to sort of bring. It was weird because I was bringing all the anti-New York hate to San Francisco, right? And people couldn't stand it. But then 9/11 happened the next year, and suddenly it wasn't cool to hate New York any longer.
Right.
So I actually had to ditch the tie and go to a completely different look. I had my quote unquote retired buddy look, where I wore the sweatpants, the leisure, velour jogging suit, as a manager, instead of the suit and tie with the Yankees tie things.
But it's so funny that I think wrestling does parallel baseball in certain ways. We had Paige Von Hess of Sutherland, who's the daughter of Kurt Von Hess.
We need to get her on the show too. Yeah,
she
that's
was
a reminder.
Fabulous, and one of the stories she told was her dad would rarely let her go to the matches, and but this one occasion she went, and with her sister, and I think her dad was wrestling Afa from the Wild Samoans, and I guess Kurt was the heel and Afa was the babyface, and he generated so much heat that the fans actually followed Kurt to his car. Now you got Kurt in the car with the two daughters, and fans are trying to turn the car over. And fortunately, some of the other wrestlers and the cops broke it up, but just to show the level of passion the fans had. Not that it was good, but I mean how emotionally invested they were in wrestling. And it was the same way when we were kids in baseball, arguing for our favorite player or our favorite team, or if you were from a different town, if you were from Boston, we automatically hated each other because you were a Red Sox fan and I was a Yankee fan.
And you would have those baseball cards you never trade away.
Oh,
Doesn't matter what would be offered to you.
No.
In the Bay Area, you couldn't get a kid to trade a Willie McCovey or a Willie Mays card. Doesn't matter if you had a Honus Wagner. Doesn't matter if you had a Babe Ruth rookie card.
Well, and that's the thing now. If you had a Willie, I mean, how long was Willie Mays a Giant? How long was Willie McCovey a Giant, or any of those guys? And now, you might get a guy on your team. You can't really develop a loyalty to a player anymore because they're going to be gone in 4 or 5 years when their contract is up.
I mean, he was only a San Francisco Giant for a couple of years, but he was a New York Giant, obviously.
Right.
The best part of his years. Yeah, he was only here for a couple of years before he retired. But Willie McCovey, he was, or even a guy like Will Clark, if you want to go about, and even though he played somewhere else, everyone really feels like they identify with him as the Giant.
Yes.
As the Giant Will Clark. So we're running out of time. I want you to throw out a couple stories that you had. I know you said you prepared so much. I feel guilty because you prepared all this stuff, and then we eat up all this time on all these side chats, and you probably didn't get a chance to say all of your stuff. First of all, tell me, who is the? Have you met any great baseball players, and if so, who have you met?
It's really funny. I'm trying to think. The only ball player I think I ever had chatted with was Jim Eisenreich, who played for the Twins and the Royals. I actually lived in Kansas City for a number of years, in Blue Springs, Missouri, and at the time he was playing for the Royals, and he went to the same church that I did, and I happened to recognize him, and then I saw him at the Golden Corral, and we just started chatting, just a regular guy, and but no, I mean, I've had far more interaction with wrestlers than I have with ball players.
Well, I've got three. I've got three that I can pull out. One is that I had a chance to meet Vida Blue a couple of years ago, and you really, really couldn't get a nicer person to interview than Vida Blue.
What a ball player! What a pitcher!
And what a nice guy! Super nice guy. He, we were at a golfing thing, a Dave Casper charity foundation event, and a lot of guys came in and left, but Vida Blue stayed longer, and like his golfing buddies were like, hey, come on, let's go golfing. He's like, no, I want to talk to these guys. So he was really super friendly. So I got to say, Vida Blue was one of the nicest people that I'd met. The other one that I have a quick story about, Orlando Cepeda, who I got to interview, and I interviewed him for 45 minutes. Now, he was supposed to be part of this big press junket for a restaurant that was opening up in Sacramento, and they had a sign and autographs thing with Orlando Cepeda, but they misadvertised it, and they put the wrong date down. So nobody showed up except for me. So it's just me sitting there with Orlando Cepeda to my right side and a bunch of Mexican food. And we just sat there, and I talked to him because none of the other press people showed up. So it was an exclusive interview that I had with Orlando, and we talked for 45 minutes over everything about his life, which was wonderful. He's a devoted Buddhist and one of the most even-centered people that I've ever talked to. Really fantastic. But the final one, and probably a name you're not familiar with, is a guy by the name of Buddy Biancalana.
Oh, yeah.
You do know who Buddy Biancalana is?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Buddy Biancalana went to my high school. We have three famous people that went to four famous people that went to my high school. One is Robin Williams.
Wow.
Two is Gavin Newsom. Now, Gavin Newsom actually was in my math class. So he was the same grade as me, and I actually, knew, quote unquote, knew him, although he had nothing to do with me. Third was Pete Carroll from the Seattle Seahawks. And four is Buddy Biancalana, went to Redwood High School. And I had a business networking group that I was in, and Buddy Biancalana joined as to sell a product that he has to teach people how to be better athletes. It's kind of like a computerized program that shows you when you're in your sweet spot, no matter what sport you're in, no matter what you're trying to do, like whether you're trying to swing a tennis racket, he shows you like where your apex is on your swing, or a bat or a golf club, or throwing a pass where your arm needs to be. So Buddy Biancalana was in my networking group for like about a year, and so I got to see him every week, and he's also just the super nicest guy. So as far as my experience goes, meeting baseball players and getting to talk to them, they've been some of the nicest people that I've ever had a chance to work with. So I'm a big fan. I mean, baseball has meant so much to me because it's touched me in my life in all these different intersections with it. And it just breaks my heart to see it locked out and to be made sort of the pariah of sports because of what it's going through currently.
So, I mean, I'm kind of just, I like wrestling. I mean, I go back to my time warp. I go back to the 70s. I'll watch a Bruno title match on YouTube. Same thing with baseball. I go back to my childhood memories, And one of the stories I wanted, and it's just a very obscure thing. And again, thanks to the folks at Baseball Almanac, I pinpointed the date. So it was June 18th, 1965, which was 6 days before my 10th birthday, and the Yankees were playing the Twins, and Mantle and Maris both hit home runs that game, which was monumental. But that's not why I wanted to tell the story. There was a ball player, and his name was Ross Moschito, and I think he's from San Bernardino, California. I'm not quite sure, but they called him Mickey Mantle's legs. He would play, and because Mantle was getting at the end of his career, and his legs were really bad. So Ross Moschito, number 53, would come in like the 8th inning to spell Mantle, and rarely would get an at bat. But I think this game, I think Mantle might have been playing first base, but Moschito actually hit his one and only major league home run off the left field foul pole.
Huh.
And so, I mean, I can say that, and I'm trying to search for the the baseball equivalent of pro wrestling stories that I write for, because I want to write a story about Ross Moschito, and I think he's still around. I think he's on Facebook. I'm gonna have to look him up, but that was something. And the only other story I wanted to tell real quick was, so very rarely as a child, I again grew up on Long Island. WPIX would show the Yankees games, and very rarely would they ever show a day game. And this one particular week, there was the Yankees were playing the Red Sox in Fenway, and there was going to be a day game at 1:00. And I wasn't going to be able to just stay home from school, so I had to do the Ferris Bueller, playing sick. And I mean, I worked it for everything it was worth, and I got my mom to let me stay home. And then all day I'm preparing for this game, and the excitement's building as it gets closer and closer to 1:00. Finally, the hour comes, and I flip on WPIX, and I look and say, you hear the Yankees-Red Sox game has been postponed. We now present Rain Out Theater. It's like, oh God! Like, I mean, the words that went through my head that I never would have said, because my mom would have taken every bar Ivory soap in the house and washed my mouth out with it. But like, man, what a bummer!
Wow.
But that's how much I love baseball.
Yeah, no, I mean, baseball has that special something, especially because it's during the week. It's something that happens sometimes during the day. It is the only sport that you can really play hooky for and take the day off and have it occupy the middle of the day, and then it's unlike basketball and football is a build-up event. The week builds up, and then Sunday, pow, or Monday night, pow.
You only got 16 of them. Well, now 17.
Yeah, pow. You build up to it, and then you have the explosion. And in basketball, even though it's there are a lot of games, there's still gaps between
right.
Games. But the fact that baseball is something you can rely on every night,
day, sometimes twice a day.
Yeah, it's these days not so much.
Not so much these days, right?
Certainly when we were younger. But yeah, it's something that you could just sort of rely upon and just know that it's there, and that it's kind of like the heartbeat of American sports is still baseball, because of the fact that it runs so long and it fills up your summer. I mean, what is the summer without baseball? It really is hard to place. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'll just catch up on my Netflix queue. Oh, well, it'll be like it was in 2020 when, there were a bunch of missed games and they had to do stuff in a bubble type thing. And just the fact that people are growing to accept summers without baseball as part of it is a sad statement of the fabric of America. And it sort of erodes something that's generational, if you get my meaning.
Absolutely. And, Evan made that comment about wrestling. He used the term, the bar's been lowered. And I think we could say the same thing for baseball.
Yeah, it has. And I wonder, do you go to any Tampa Bay's Rays games, or?
I'll go to one or two a year, and typically if the Yankees are in town. It's the stadium is very. It's not. There's no personality to it, and it's very hard
That's Tropicana, right?
Yes, the Trop, and
I've seen it on TV, and it looks terrible.
It is, and it's very hard to get to. And nobody. I mean, I would not be the least bit surprised if if the Rays moved to Las Vegas, because they don't support the team here.
And that's I thank my lucky stars that you almost had the Giants.
What year was that? I remember that too.
That was 1993, okay. I think. Yeah, it was just because I went to what was supposedly the last Giants game. You know, the one just before they were going to go to Tampa St. Pete.
Wow.
And you know what? Now I'm thinking it might have been later than that. Might have been more like about 97. I'm thinking, because then right after that they got Barry Bonds.
It was after they got Bonds or before?
No, it was just before they got Bonds.
Okay.
And then that was like the double whammy or the triple whammy. Was 1, we kept the Giants. 2, we got Barry Bonds, and 3, we moved to at the time Pac Bell Park. Which the moment I walked into Pac Bell Park, I said 2 things, and I still say it to myself when I walk in there 20 years later. 1, why wasn't the park always in this spot? And 2, why didn't it always look like this? Because I don't think you've ever had a chance to go to Oracle Park or Pac Bell or AT&T.
No, I have not.
But it truly is one of the best stadiums in not just baseball, but the world. I absolutely adore it. It's just everything that you want in a baseball stadium. And that's something that I'm going to really miss if the Giants are locked out this year, is just being in the park. Just like you talked about, is that there's something about, you can watch whatever games on TV. It's always going to be the same because you're watching it at your house. But when you get into the park, and I'm sorry to say this, but the Giants are the last like affordable ticket that you can get right now. The Warriors are through the roof right now. The cheapest you can buy a ticket, a single seat, is like $85 for a Warriors.
Crazy, yeah.
And the cheapest ticket that you can get a 49ers ticket for is like $200. And so, I'm not going to spend, I love my kids, I'm not spending $1,000 to go to a football game and take my 2 kids there. I'm not going to spend $400 or $500 on a Warriors game to take my kids there. But, for around $100, I can take my kids to a Giants game, which still isn't totally affordable, but at least it's something I can take them to. When you consider parking, when you consider the tickets, you consider food, all that, it winds up being around $100. It's not something I can do every day, but at least it's something that I can do to connect with my kids and bring them an element of my childhood that they can still experience. But it's, if that becomes $200 or $300 like it is for 49er games and Warrior games, we're just going to have to keep watching it on TV, and my cable bill keeps going up. So that, who knows when that's going to finally, push me to the brink, and it's sad that we have to make the choice between what we love and what we can afford to see. And that wasn't the case, growing up, and it wasn't the case for other generations.
It never was. I mean, it only has become lately, and it really is sad.
It really is, and wrestling suffers from that too. Benny, we've had an amazing hour. Can you believe it's been an hour?
Yeah, it's actually been a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I know, but can you believe it just moves so fast? And
baseball's one of those things, and I remember back in the day what they call it the hot stove league, where people would, in a winter, they would do nothing but chat about baseball. They chat about their team's chances for the upcoming season, and then the biggest. Remember the phrase, "Wait till next year." Like you were kind of alluding to, you said when the season ended, you were hoping the next season would start so you can get it going because you knew your team had a chance.
It's all true. It's all true, and hopefully there will be one this season. I've really had a great time talking to you tonight on the show, and
likewise, my pleasure.
it's great to do your show too. We'd love to have Dan on the show and get back to wrestling.
We got to work on that. We got to work on getting Dan on the show.
We'll figure out a way to make that all happen. But I really appreciate you being on the show tonight, and we will definitely have you as a guest again. But I felt today's show was really special for me to do something like this with you. And
I whoever listens to this, my hope is that they listen to me and know that I'm not just a one-trick pony. Same with you. We're a lot deeper than just wrestling.
I got lots of tricks. This pony still has a lot of tricks.
I got more than wrestling and baseball, but at least I have two that people have listened to.
Very good. Well, anyway, you have a great week. We'll get you on the show again soon, and thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
We'll see everyone next week. Good night, everybody.
Take care.